Hello everyone! The presentation today, postponed from April, will connect last year's topic, China, with this year's topic, inspiring women. It's a bit ironic that our chosen topic this year is inspiring women. Much of my Fanny's China paper talked about Fanny as exactly that, an inspiring woman. So the delay in the presentation crosses the bridge from China to Fanny. Frances Jones Highsmith was a long-time Tuesday Club member and our beloved Fanny. The world was Fanny's oyster. As I researched this paper, I realized that Fanny has significantly affected all of us for a whole year. From the Tuesday Club inception as a study group, this topic, China, has moved us past our traditional comfort zones. It has been a good stretch for us. Fanny would have been thrilled. For our new members, Fanny Highsmith was a remarkable woman, full of grace, elegance, smart, and oh so wise. She was a devoted Tuesday Club member. She suggested the topic China at the Tuesday Club annual meeting for at least 4 years, maybe more. It became a bit of a smile as Fanny, in a determined way, added it to the list of considerations every year. Her passing was an enormous loss for us. Someone, in January of 2018, a year and a half after her death, added it to the list for 2019-2020 consideration. Whoever it was, thank you. Like many of you whose turn it was to present a paper this year, I thought, China? I did vote for this topic. Mulling it over, I began to wonder, why was Fanny so earnest in her interest in China? I decided that that would be my topic, and I assumed that there would be multiple rabbit holes in her library and collections to descend, and I would be close to Fanny for a whole year of research. I had visited Fanny many times in her sweet love of a house. It is across the street from the museum. It was a home that her grandmother Jones purchased, and that, quote, young marrieds lived in the 1920s and the 1930s. Including Fanny's parents. Fanny's first memories were from that house. It went out of the family for a time and ultimately came back into her care. While researching this paper, I asked permission to look at Fanny's library and collections. I was convinced that I would find her interests in China and I would report on those interests. That was the plan. There was not a large, significant collection of Chinese art or artifacts, and there were 3 books in her library that were China-related. The first, a novel. The second, a biography, The Life and Death in Shanghai, by Nian Chen, published in 1986. She was persecuted heavily during the Mao Zedong Revolution. It was in solitary confinement that she created her thinking, for 6 years. This was her story of the deprivation she endured and her quest for justice when she was released. The third book, The Flight of the Dragon, an essay on the theory and practice of art in China and Japan, based on original sources. This book has its own story, which I'm going to address later. I had to look hard for these books in her library. But what an honor to see the breadth of Fanny's interests that were reflected in her library. That could be a topic of a Tuesday Club paper, Fanny's library. The question, why was Fanny so interested in China? 2 answers rose to the top in multiple conversations that I had with those who loved her. When I asked why Fanny consistently suggested China for Tuesday Club, one answer consistently came first, from her daughter Betsy. She was interested in China, certainly, but she was interested in all people, the human spirit and character, nations, cultures, religions, race, and gender. She never discriminated. Her question was, why eliminate anyone in our world? She was a listener, observer, and a student of the world. From her daughter Kate, my mother thought it was important to be interested in the world, its culture, and its people. She openly shared her interests and invited others to be curious about the world and accepting of differences. There were times when she was quite courageous about this. She felt and expressed that there was always room to include everyone, her family, her neighborhood, church, country, and from worldwide cultures. Fanny made a difference by her example of inclusion and world curiosity. People listened to and respected Fanny. She was inclusive. And here we are, influenced by Fanny's interest in the world. She consistently encouraged us to study China, to be curious, and study something outside our own experience. We listened, observed, and studied this year, just as Fanny suggested. And we are changed by our study this year, part of Fanny's influence. Part of Fanny's interest in the world came from her parents and grandparents who traveled extensively and valued learning. These values surrounded her life, and she passed this curiosity to her family and to us. The second answer of why Fanny's interest in China was a short and loving answer. Fanny's 2 granddaughters were adopted from China in 2004. Annie Yelan Crane Mitten and Maya Cole Miasha Hagstrom. Fanny loved and delighted in her granddaughters. Her daughters Betsy and Kate shared family history that helped influence their interest in adopting daughters from China. This from Betsy. We resonated with China because my husband, Roger's maternal grandfather, and several generations before him were Methodist ministers to China. In fact, Roger's grandfather was a contemporary of author Pearl S. Buck. Here's a little Chinese history for some context to this family connection. Roger's ancestors were in China as the Boxer Rebellion was beginning around 1900. Curiosity sent me down a road. Let's take a moment to learn about the Boxer Rebellion. It was an uprising against foreigners and Christians that occurred in China about 1900. A secret society known for their boxing skills, they embarked on a violent campaign to drive all foreigners from China. Causes of the rebellion included foreign attempts at colonizing China, a growing rich and wealthy class having little concern for rural struggles, and privileged Westerners. A major cause of discontent in northern China was missionary activity. Treaties signed in 1860 had granted foreign missionaries the freedom to preach anywhere in China and to buy land on which to build churches. There was growing resentment. Severe weather at this time also caused suffering in rural areas, which led to unrest. Drought, followed by floods in 1897, forced farmers to flee to cities and seek food. Eventually, this uprising against the wealthy and against Western influences was supported by the Chinese government. The Boxer Rebellion continued until an 8-nation alliance, mostly in Europe and in the U.S., stepped in to protect their land and economic interests. In the end, the alliance worked with China's ruling dynasties to settle the rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion made it unsafe for Roger's grandfather to stay in China, and he returned to the U.S. knowing that it would be too dangerous for him to return. Others of the family stayed in China. They felt it was their home. One aunt was killed in the Boxer Rebellion. This history and stories came to Fanny through Betsy. Fanny's daughter Kate's husband, Jonathan, also had family in China, cousins, also missionaries. Kate visited her cousin Cole in Taiwan. She and Jonathan visited Japan for a fellowship and friends in Hong Kong. They enjoyed traveling and experiencing Asian cultures. They had multiple interests in China. These stories came to Fanny through Kate. On the Jones side of the family, there was a fascination with Asia. Betsy and Kate's grandfather, Edward Bud Jones, and an uncle, Alan Jones, did business in Japan. Bud and grandmother Helen enjoyed worldwide travel. They set an excellent example of interest in world cultures. There was a history of interest with Asia in the Jones family as well. Betsy and Roger adopted from China, feeling it was very important to admire, love, and celebrate the country and culture from where your child is adopted. They incorporated Chinese culture into their family. It became inherent in their family history. Kate and Jonathan felt that adopting from China was right for them, also admiring and incorporating Chinese culture into their family and celebrating it. So Fanny's daughters, their husbands, Fanny's family, through multiple generations and connections, had interest in China, historical and current. So my initial idea about sharing Tuesday Club Fanny's specific interest in art and literature, it became about her family interests. She was curious about China in general, and on becoming more informed on behalf of her daughter's family, and especially her granddaughters. As our Tuesday Club presentations unfolded, I was struck by how much Fanny would have enjoyed each and every one. Then I decided to project. What would Fanny have learned on her own? Before the use of the internet, Fanny might have referenced a world book. As fate and my big old house would have it, I had my parents' beautiful world book collection from 1990. I did not have the heart to part with it when they were downsizing, and they have been in a box in my house for 5 years, and I knew exactly where they were. I just had to find volume C, and there were 2 volumes. China also, by the way, is not very far in the C volume from Chinese, Chicago, or chicken. There were so many distractions in my research. Information from this 1990 World Book was an excellent review of our Tuesday Club season. China is in Eastern Asia. China is the 3rd largest country in area in the world. It is the largest country in population in the world. In 1990, it was estimated that 1,100,000,000 people lived in China. That is 298 persons per square mile. Flash forward, that number is now 1,400,000,000. It is one of the world's first civilizations and ruled through a political system based on hereditary monarchies. The capital is Beijing. Chief products are agriculture, manufacturing of cement, chemicals, clothing, and mining. The national anthem is March of the Volunteers. There were pages and pages of history, some of which we have explored in our year of study. They had a beautiful map that showed the geography of China. You could see where the most densely populated regions of China were. It was fascinating. There was a section on life, family life, which noted that sons were more valued than daughters, rural life was more difficult than urban life, and information about food, clothing, religion, education, literature, painting, sculpture, pottery, music, theater, and a description of religions throughout their country. Pages and pages about history and politics, languages, wildlife, a whole page of additional resources for additional study. I absorbed it all. The next entry, by the way, after China was the chipmunk. From this World Book, I learned that using the World Book is still a good idea. I absorbed more slowly and definitively. I will now unpack this collection and find a place for it in the living room. As I finish this Tuesday Club paper, our culture and community is in a self-imposed quarantine. I will have time to walk through some of these volumes. I guess that's one silver lining. Then, of course, I was curious about what changes there might have been in 20 years and garnered this information from Wikipedia. Today, China is still the most populated country in the world. It is still geographically the 3rd largest in the world. There are 22 provinces. It is now the fastest growing economy. It has the largest purchasing power parity in the world. It is the largest exporter. The U.S. is the largest importer. It has the largest standing army and the 2nd largest defense budget. It is now the largest number of rich people in the world who live there. As we think about our study of China this year, I wanted to review some points of information that we learned, and we can all use a review. Remember, Fanny would have been in our audience. Our papers have provided an initial introduction to China. I wanted to review more solidly to remember some of what we learned. So it's quiz time, heads up. This would be more fun if we were all together. However, we started with Carol Ward Knox. Oh my, she set a high bar for us. Carol very creatively taught us that China's history is deep and rich and informed by many dynasties, and that the current mix of politics and personalities, as she eloquently pointed out with her team, it's complicated, very complicated. So quiz time. What were the names of the 4 leaders in 1972 who negotiated, and what did they negotiate? The 4 were President Nixon, Chairman Mao Zedong, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and Premier Zhou Enlai. They were working to improve U.S. and China relations. Were they successful? They agreed to disagree, but relations were better. Terry Knox taught us about the Mosu, a culture of women, not based on marriage, but where matrilineal and matrilocal in nature. What does matrilineal and matrilocal mean? Matrilineal is community based on the mother or the female line. Matrilocal, a custom in marriage whereby the husband goes to live with the wife's family. I didn't remember all of that. Did you remember that? So this is why I wanted to do this. Debbie Pierce presented Education in China. China has the largest education in the world. China requires a 9-year compulsory education for children. Quiz time. What philosophical and ethical teaching has had the biggest influence on education in China? Confucianism. Who founded this teaching? Confucius. Is higher education in China very competitive? Yes. What does filial piety mean? Filial piety means to be good and care for one's parents, engage in good conduct so as to bring a good name to one's parents and ancestors. A high priority is doing well in school. Marcia Wilson introduced us to the Chinese New Year and grand celebrations. A particular color is prominent during the Chinese New Year, used in lanterns, door couplets, ornaments, envelopes filled with money, pendants, and paper cutouts. This color is a symbol of happiness, wealth, and prosperity in Chinese culture and can ward off evil spirits and bring good luck. So what color is this? Red. We'll use a lot of it now. Marie Nelson explained that the Great Wall of China was a series of walls built over a period of 2,500 years. How long is the Great Wall of China? About 13,000 miles long. Shirley Johnson introduced us to China's remarkable First Lady. So what was her name? Peng Liyuan. Her other career, what was she famous for? She was a singer. Marty Tenzer taught us that most of the significant discoveries and advances in pottery came from thousands of years of Chinese refinement, and that in the late 1500s, exported porcelain was so fine that it was labeled Chinaware, and China still bears the name regardless of where it was produced, rather like Kleenex or Xerox. What substance in earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain? What are they made of? Clay. In 1600 BC in China, what invention was made to create clay pieces and structures? The potter's wheel. I didn't know that that had been around since 1600. Carolyn Nord covered the arts in China. She noted that the Chinese people have had difficult times over the dynastic periods. She had a one-sheet timeline indicating all the dynastic periods, which was very impressive. So here's the quiz. What is the symbol of yin and yang and what does it look like? It's sort of two apostrophes together, usually black and white in a circle. China has the longest continuous culture. How many years approximately? 4,200 years in the history of the world. For my presentation, I would like you to remember Fanny's example, to be curious about the world, to be open to the differences in cultures and include them. I learned definitively how to spell Chinese. I always had too many E's in there. And do you remember how to say hello? Ni hao. Now you remember that I had one other book I wanted to tell you about. And here is a picture of it. I hope. There it is. I mentioned that in her library I found 3 books. The third has turned out to be very important. It's a small volume, The Flight of the Dragon, an essay on the theory and practice of art in China and Japan, based on original sources. It is a part of a series called Wisdom of the East, first published in London in 1911. This volume was reprinted in 1943, its 7th printing. Finding it was a eureka moment, and I thought, finally, something that addressed Fanny's interest in art, and there was marginalia. When I opened it, I discovered it was originally a gift from Charles Core, and research did not lead me to discover who he was, although maybe someone of us knows who he is, to Mary Hoard in 1946. I thought the marginalia was Fanny's, but on closer examination, it was Mary Hoard's handwriting. The famous crossed T further into the volume gave it away, and I remember her handwriting from documents I saw at the museum. In pencil, the handwriting reads, the first one, "Exquisite volume. Wish I could tell Charles Core how true and delicate I think it is, and the years I have enjoyed it." The second, "This is a prize volume to me. Each year it gives me more pleasure." 1979. That was 33 years. As many of you know, Mary Hoard was a painter and began the Mary Hoard Art Show to support and highlight community art. This book provides insights into Mary's interpretations she applied to her own art. This is a pretty amazing discovery. I suspect that Fanny got this from Mary Hoard's estate sale. Fanny and I would bump into each other at sales. So this volume of Mary Hoard's, saved from obscure fate, became a part of Fanny's library. She would have known to snatch it up given the marginalia in the book. Thank you, Fanny. For those of you who might have thought that this paper would have been about Fanny's tableware china, place settings, serving pieces, a few words about the other Fanny's china. This beautiful china is French. Montpierre pattern made by Longchamp in Montpierre, Saint-Marie, a beautiful region in southern France. Their china making tradition began in the mid-18th century. These dishes are probably from the mid-19th century. I love the characters on them. The dinner plates had a variety of patterns, but also I think the teacup with the woman with the guitar and the very delicate flowers, the provincial nature of the yellow and the blue was so Fanny. This is English Spode. The pattern is Chelsea birds. It's mid-18th century, probably about 1830s. This also was another very rich set of china that Fanny used. This place setting was acquired by Fanny's mother. It has dragons and birds, a phoenix, which are in the center. I have not been able to identify the pattern or the maker. There was only a very slight mark on the back. Kate remembers it fondly, as Fanny used it for family gatherings. Pat Jones remembers that Fanny always had a love of porcelain and other china. think it's appropriate that we should end with a teacup. The year of research was a circuitous one. Like Fanny's example, I had to be curious, regroup my thinking many times, and ask different questions. I close with a quote on Wisdom of the East, series editor Cranmer Bing, that nails Fanny's philosophy, absorbed by her daughters and others, now including me, and I share it with you. He says, "The object of the editor of this series is a definite one. He desires above all things that in their humble way, these books shall be ambassadors of goodwill and understanding between East and West, the old world of thought and the new of action. He is confident that a deeper knowledge of the great ideals and lofty philosophy of Oriental thought may help to a revival of the true spirit of charity, which neither despises nor fears the nations of another creed and color." Thank you to Fanny for encouraging us to study China.